a strange rain falls from a thunderous sky. Somewhere beneath the storm, a man demands of someone named Tsuyoshi if he has any idea what he's doing. He warns, if Tsuyoshi doesn't get rid of what he's holding right now, he'll regret it for the rest of his life. Cradling a baby in his arms, Tsuyoshi apologizes to Samedare and slowly backs away, leaving the other man on the edge of madness. Still, deep down, Tsuyoshi is certain he made the right choice. In this world, many years ago, there once were terrible, merciless demons called honest creatures that destroyed anyone and anything in their path without a shred of pity. Yet there were those who stood up against these evil beings. One such man was Momotaro. He ventured to Onigashima Island, where he defeated countless Honest, igniting an all-out war between this legendary hero and the demons. Jumping to the present day, in modern Japan, there's a liquor store called Ikenos. Inside, a teenager named Shiki Ikenos has dozens of firearms of every kind displayed on his bedroom wall. Chatting with a friend on the phone, he explains that he's just been kicked out of somewhere, not that he cares, since he couldn't stand those people anyway. Shiki even apologizes for butting into his friend's fight, saying he could have handled it himself. Once he hangs up, he's left staring into space, wondering what he's supposed to do with his life now that he's been expelled. Suddenly, a man storms into Shiki's room and clocks him on the head. It's his dad, Tsuyoshi Ikenos, there to chew him out for getting kicked out. Shiki, never one to hold back, snaps for his dad to shut up, nearly earning himself another punch. He dodges with a backflip instead. Tsuyoshi wants to know what's going through his son's head. Why is he collecting rifles? When they run a liquor store, not an armory, Shiki can't even be bothered to answer. He just mentions that the store's lost another supplier, and his dad tells him to stay out of grown-up business. Shiki laughs, watching his dad act like the most mature guy on earth. The tables turn, though, when Tsuyoshi mocks him for getting expelled. That one hits Shiki right in the Achilles heel. Looking genuinely downcast, Shiki insists he'll never be like his dad. Frankly, it's a blessing they're not even blood related. Tsuyoshi is about to launch into a lecture, but the phone rings. He leaves, saving his rant for another time. While Tsuyoshi takes a drink order, a picture of little Shiki as a child sits on the counter. For all his harsh words and questionable parenting, Tsuyoshi loves his son more than anything. Back in his room, Shiki wonders why he couldn't have been adopted by some rich guy. With a pistol in hand, he takes aim at a target taped to the wall and slowly squeezes the trigger. But before he can fire, a loud crash echoes from the street. Looking outside, he's blinded by thick smoke billowing through the neighborhood. That's when it happens. A shadowy, mist-like tentacle grabs Shiki and yanks him straight into the chaos outside. Out of that swirling mist steps a menacing man with a terrifying glare. He asks if Shiki Ikenos is the one he's after. Suddenly, a car comes barreling through, slamming into the stranger without a hint of hesitation. Tsuyoshi throws open the door and shouts for Shiki to get in now. As soon as Shiki jumps inside, Tsuyoshi speeds off. Behind them, the man lies motionless as that dark mist circles his body. Flying down the road, Tsuyoshi explains they have to get out of the country, fast. Shiki, thinking his dad owes a loan shark or something, points out that running someone over isn't how you solve debt problems. But Tsuyoshi insists that man isn't dead. Swerving through traffic, Tsuyoshi drops another bomb. Shiki has only blood. While the man they just hit carries the blood of Momotaro, Shiki thinks his dad is messing with him, and honestly, Tsuyoshi gets it. It's a wild story. But the truth is staring Shiki in the face. Before they can process any of it, the man with Momotaro's blood catches up to the car, hell-bent on finishing the job. After a failed attempt to take them out, he shrouds the car in his shadowy mist, forcing Tsuyoshi to stop. Shiki jumps out first, witnessing pure horror. His father follows, just as the car explodes, shielding his eyes from the blast. Tsuyoshi realizes Shiki is gone, and a trail of dark mist snakes through a nearby window. Inside, Shiki is trapped by that mysterious energy, as its wielder declares that because Shiki has Oni blood, he's nothing but a blight on humanity. People like him, Samedare Momoya, from the Momotaro organization, exist to wipe out such plagues. Tsuyoshi bursts into the building and confirms the legend. For thousands of years, Momotaro and the Honest have been at war, generation after generation, with each side's descendants growing in number. Eventually, Momotaro's descendants joined forces to form this organization, while, out of fear, the Honest began living hidden among humans. As he finishes the story, Tsuyoshi gets ready to draw a sword formed from the very shadows. Samedare reacts with supernatural speed, launching an attack that shakes the room as three blades collide. With two smaller weapons, Samedare is faster, but Tsuyoshi stands his ground, wielding his massive sword with unwavering strength. As they break apart, Samedare claims that this black mist is unique to Momotaro's bloodline. He looks Tsuyoshi in the eye and says, "It's been a long time." Ex-member of the Momotaro organization, Tsuyoshi Momogawara, furious, Tsuyoshi snaps that he's not to be called that name. His son, meanwhile, is left speechless by this revelation. Tsuyoshi insists his last name is Ikanos, but Samadare just shrugs. It doesn't matter what he calls himself. The facts are what they are. All he expects is that Tsuyoshi remembers just how dangerous Honest can be. And since Tsuyoshi sheltered one of those demons, the traitor has to go along with his son. But Tsuyoshi refuses to go down without a fight. He charges his rival and lands a blow so powerful, it splits the ground beneath their feet. Next, an intense exchange of blows erupts, with neither side gaining the upper hand. The battle is locked in perfect balance, every strike and parry measured. All the while, Samadare is desperate to understand why his former comrade is protecting an Oni after all. It's just a monster that brings harm to people. Shiki, meanwhile, is paralyzed by countless doubts, unable to move a muscle. At one point, Tsuyoshi launches a furious attack on Samadare, but his rival anticipates the move and counters with a devastating blow that tears through both of Tsuyoshi's shoulders. Crippled by the wound, Tsuyoshi collapses, spilling blood all around him. At the same time, his missed blade retracts, and Shiki screams, horrified by the brutal scene unfolding before his eyes. Swollen with pride after his victory, Samadare taunts Tsuyoshi, asking how he ever thought he could defeat someone who's been flirting with death ever since he left. In that moment, Shiki, still restrained, calls out, determined to fight his enemy no matter what. But before he can act, his father grabs their opponent, stopping him from lunging at his son. Again, Samadare demands to know why Tsuyoshi is defending such a monstrous creature. The answer is as raw as it is obvious: that boy is his beloved son. He may have Oni blood, Tsuyoshi admits, but he's never hurt anyone in his life. Right now, Samadare is about to kill a defenseless child who has no idea what's going on. Running out of patience for his old friend, the Momotaro descendant conjures his missed blade once more, aiming to plunge it into his adversary's back. Shiki watches, burning with such deep hatred that it triggers an unexpected reaction in his body. A dark, reddish miasma begins to swirl around him, his eyes bleeding uncontrollably, and then comes an overwhelming, uncontrollable urge to kill. In a blink, Samadare finds himself facing several firearms pointed right at his face, ready to fire. When the shots ring out, the Momotaro moves with nearly superhuman speed, dodging and protecting himself. Hanging from the ceiling, Shiki Ikanos looks like a blood-drenched demon, and it's clear from his enemy's face that the Oni has finally revealed his true, menacing form. In the hunter's mind, Onis are masters at manipulating blood, but that's not even the worst thing about them. Suddenly, Shiki rushes forward at monstrous speed, unleashing a barrage of blows so powerful that his opponent is forced to fall back, even as he blocks each strike with his swords. Yet after regaining his composure, the human coolly slices off the beast's arm only for it to regenerate in moments, resetting the fight. As Samadare watches this bizarre transformation, he reflects on why they hunt creatures like this. Because they can spiral into these uncontrollable frenzies. With his transformation complete, Shiki pulls countless automatic weapons from his own body, firing wildly at his enemy, who barely manages to defend himself. In the chaos, as he dodges a rocket made of blood, the man realizes he's in way over his head. Still, rather than run, he tries to create distance, hoping for an opening to strike back. When that gap finally appears, the Momotaro seizes it, hurling a mist blade that kicks up a massive cloud of dust. Exhausted from the effort, Samadare is barely standing, while Shiki returns to the fight completely unscathed. With incredible speed, the Oni kicks the human onto a collapsing bridge, inflicting massive damage. Weakened, the Momotaro air watches as the Oni approaches, guns blazing, showing no mercy. After this brutal storm of bloody bullets, Shiki is left breathless. Not far away, Samadare coughs up a shocking amount of blood and rises to his feet, half his face mangled. Even so, battered and bloody, he shouts with a defiant edge that the boy is just a lowly Oni. Hearing this, Shiki lets out a demonic roar, but soon his strength fades, and he reverts from his monstrous form, giving the demon hunter a sudden surge of confidence. Disoriented, Shiki looks down at his deformed body and panics. Samadare guesses the boy has lost his memory, confused by the transformation. Summoning a sword from the stump where his arm used to be, he moves in to finish things once and for all. Helpless and unsure of what to do, Shiki stands there, utterly exposed and vulnerable. Then, as one sword comes down, another joins the fight. Tsuyoshi, Shiki's father, has recovered just enough strength to strike back at his former comrade. In one swift move, both Momotaro are run through with their swords. As death closes in, Samadare asks, one last time, how Tsuyoshi could stand by the monster's side even after witnessing such horror and violence. But all Tsuyoshi can think about is little, gentle Shiki, an innocent boy who deserves a shot at happiness, just like anyone else in this world. With a faint smile, Tsuyoshi says he has no regrets. Outside, the townspeople finally register the total destruction and scramble to alert the authorities. Without warning, Samadare vanishes into his dark mist, leaving Shiki alone with his wounded father. Resting in his son's lap, the man begs him, just this once, to listen calmly. First, he apologizes for never telling his son the truth. Even though Shiki is lost and confused now, his father just wanted to protect him and keep him from ever learning that people only wanted to kill him because he was an Oni. Whatever the case, he admits he can't stay by his son's side any longer. Shiki will have to find the strength to stand on his own so he won't be vulnerable to the Momotaro, or even to other Onis. If he can do that, there's a chance for happiness. According to his father, that's what they call a man's promise. Furious, the boy tells his father to shut up and tries to force him up off the ground. But it's painfully clear the man is living his final moments, a truth his son refuses to accept. Shiki yells, ordering his father not to give up, desperate for them to still have a chance to talk about their future together. "You hear me, you lousy father?" the boy shouts. With a gentle smile, Tsuyoshi replies that it would be wonderful if Onis and Momotaros could live side by side like this. As he finishes his sentence, the man collapses, lifeless, leaving his son in utter despair. After all, his father died before the boy ever got the chance to apologize for saying he was glad they weren't related by blood. Once the anger fades, Shiki finally realizes Tsuyoshi is gone, and his anxious expression dissolves into uncontrollable, gut-wrenching sobs. In that moment, a man on rollerblades glides up behind the boy, warning him that people are going to notice him if he stays like that. Without another word, the mysterious stranger strikes, knocking the Oni out cold with ease. Meanwhile, in a room where grotesque mummies have gathered, one complains that Samadare failed, and another adds that's what he gets for going off on his own. They begin to wonder if the Momotaros have gotten weaker lately. But at the same time, they can't risk sending too many together on missions if the Onis were discovered by the public. It could throw everything into chaos. To prevent that from happening, especially after how the last mission went, their top priority now is to eliminate that Oni offspring before it awakens. Elsewhere, the director of some organization congratulates NATO for finally finding a candidate, considering he hasn't approved anyone in years. In fact, the director admits this is the best batch they've had in over a decade, and expectations are sky high for these new recruits. Besides landing a promising candidate, NATO also brought in a kid who might turn out useful, though there's no guarantee he'll amount to anything at all. In the next moment, we catch a glimpse of Shiki's childhood. He's playing in the sand at a park when his father calls him home. No tantrums, no fuss, just a kid who stands up and asks to be carried. But then, right in front of him, he sees Tsuyoshi suffer the same fatal wounds that would one day claim the life of the man who'd raised him since he was a baby, all because of that man named Samadare Momoya. Shiki jolts awake, desperate, tied to a chair with his mouth wrapped in bandages. Next to him, Nato is at his 1 in 230th push-up, using his umbrella as support. He didn't want to wake the kid up, but there's no point explaining anything while he's still out cold. After stopping his exercise, and before even introducing himself, the guy makes it clear he hates inefficiency. His name is Nato Mudano, and like Shiki, he's an Oni. He refuses to say where they are, but he does reveal that Shiki's father's body is safe somewhere else. Nato brought Shiki here to test and recruit him. And speaking of efficiency, he notices Shiki's confused look and explains the skates, it's just a quicker way to get around, kicking off the lesson. Nato confirms that Samadare, the guy who controls the Black Mist, is a Momotaro. Shiki fills with rage at the sound of that name. The teacher goes on. To be precise, Samadare and his organization are people who carry Momotaro blood, and their whole mission is to wipe out Onis. So, to fight back, the Oni organization was created, and the guy running this lesson, his job is to find hidden Onis like the kid in front of him and see if they're good enough to join the team. Class over. Now it's time for questions. Mudano takes the bandage off Shiki's mouth, and the kid immediately starts threatening him if anything's happened to his dad, he'll kill him. The teacher instantly docks a point and asks if Shiki even has the brainpower to form words, since he just explained that the father's safe, and now, thanks to this nonsense, he's lost 35 seconds of his life. Shiki yells that he doesn't trust this guy and demands to be let go. That's another 2 points gone, and now it's explained. He's tied up because he's violent. Still not satisfied, Shiki snaps, "What's with these points anyway?" The teacher just calls him a dumbass and reminds him he's being evaluated. Realizing headbutting won't get him anywhere, the prisoner takes a deep breath to calm down and, with a grin faker than the ending of Game of Thrones, politely asks to be released after all. He's got a father to avenge and all that. Seeing where this is headed, Nato, who's dealt with people trying to take their own lives before, already has the perfect method for dealing with cases like this. He knows the regular test isn't going to work, so he simply takes off his tie and uses it to hang the kid right there in the chair, declaring, "It's at death's door that people reveal who they really are." So Shiki better use that tiny brain of his to get out of this mess, unless he actually wants to go play for Vasco. With things turning dire, every hole on Shiki's face starts bleeding like crazy. but he swears to himself he's not dying here, despite all the Herculean effort. Though, he eventually stops struggling, and Nato wonders if, in the end, this poor kid really was just an idiot. But then, the blood pouring out of Shiki comes alive, sparking the Oni's frenzy and giving him a minigun ready to tear into the guy who's been calling him every name in the book. After taking hundreds of shots with his umbrella, Nato docks another 100 points and promises to show the kid how you're really supposed to use Oni blood, even if he won't remember a thing, since he's in a frenzy. Watching the demon lunge at him, the teacher notes that Shiki could have fatally wounded someone careless, but Nato never lets his guard down. Next scene, Shiki's back to human form, confused as hell about how his arm looks like a demon's. Nato figures the kid's blanked out again, so he explains Oni blood is as powerful as it is hard to control. And when you frenzy, you lose control of yourself and your memories, destroying everything around you. Shiki fires back, asking what right this guy has to talk when he's doing weird stuff with an umbrella. The man just scoffs at the ignorance in this kid's head. See, this thing with the umbrella is nothing like going into a frenzy. It's all about manipulating your blood, which takes control, not losing it. Either way, Nato's done explaining his student already flunked the test. Quick review. Shiki Ikenos only understood one thing: this Nato Mudano guy is insanely strong. Annoying as hell, but strong. Realizing this, Shiki swallows his pride and begs to become the other Oni's subordinate. He needs to get stronger, no matter what, to avenge his father. Despite the theatrics, Nato rejects the idea without a second thought. If you don't use your head in battle, you're a motorcycle with no brakes heading straight into a truck coming the other way. In this metaphor, Shiki isn't even the rider, he's the bike with no brakes. On that note, Nato can't let someone this dangerous run free. So he pops out a blade hidden in his ring, slices his own thumb, and reforms the umbrella he just destroyed, putting 2 and 2 together. Shiki bolts, trying to gain some distance so he can attack, figuring his fate is to die here, just like his father. In response, Nato morphs his weapon into something that looks like a sea urchin, ready to shred the kid's attack. Meanwhile, he's already sizing up the 4 ways this can play out. 1. Ikenos charges in, brain off, like a raging bull. 2. He'll lose his balance, sliding while staring at the target's feet. 3. He'll leap in from above. 4. He'll juke and try to run. Shiki goes with the third strategy, managing to leap over the spikes and creating an opening to fire a weapon he crafted from Oni blood. The shot causes a huge explosion, but as the dust settles, Nato is already standing there, having absorbed the full impact with nothing but his index finger. Watching his opponent's anger flare up, Nato realizes Shiki has slipped partially into a frenzy, just more proof, in his eyes, that the kid is hopeless. So, Nato gets ready to end the fight with his blood eclipse, torrential reincarnation. But Shiki is fighting tooth and nail, desperately trying to suppress his frenzy and take back control of his body and mind. And after a serious struggle, he actually pulls it off, showing the other Oni he's not just some nobody. Nato, realizing this was no lucky break, asks how the kid did it. But Shiki says he'll only spill the secret if Nato agrees to take him on as a subordinate. Of course, the teacher plays it cool and says he'll think about it. With nowhere to run, Shiki finally admits he has no idea how he did it. When he saw the teacher slicing his own finger to make an umbrella, Shiki thought maybe he could pull off something similar, so he just focused all his brain power on wanting to make a weapon. And somehow it worked. Mudano can't believe this punk actually pulled it off with such a half-baked approach. Normally, people who get swept away by their emotions are terrible at controlling Oni blood. It takes calm and sheer willpower. For example, here's how Nato Mudano manages it. He imagines a whole stage play inside his head. In a tense situation, when emotions are running wild, his rational mind calls for calm to keep his body from slipping into a frenzy. His sense of self becomes aware of the threat and decides to use just a bit of Oni blood, nothing more. Meanwhile, the frenzy gets locked away in a room, stuck there, because the problem's already been solved with reason. Now, with Shiki Ikenos, it's the complete opposite. In the same scenario, his reason is a total mess, a frantic, panicked figure, while his sense of self is so clueless it ends up beating up reason for no reason at all. In this madhouse, the frenzy is just the guest of honor at a wild party of emotional chaos. But in the end, his sense of self manages to flip the tables, forcing the frenzy to settle down through sheer brute force. In other words, Shiki uses a burst of emotion to force his blood into line, relying purely on gut feeling and instinct, not logic. People like him have all sorts of flaws, but this kind of person can unleash some seriously explosive power. Anyway, Shiki swears he'll soak up every bit of the teacher's wisdom, since he needs to get stronger to get revenge on that guy. But once again, Nato shoots down his offer and points out that what Shiki did was reckless. He gambled with his own life. risking losing himself entirely to the frenzy. To avoid that, he should have had several backup plans, but he was totally inefficient. It's a shame, really. With that, Mudano morphs his umbrella into a blade and slams it into the ground right next to Shiki's head. He tells him he's not looking for a subordinate, he wants a student. Stunned, Shiki listens as Nato explains he had to wait until the very last second to decide whether the kid was useful or not. And it was a tough call. But now that he's made up his mind, the teacher decides to fill him in on what's actually going on. First off, they're on a remote island called Onigashima, also known as the Gate of Hell. At the center of this island, there's a school built to train Honest to fight against the Momotaro, the Rosetsu Academy. At this academy, Shiki's going to learn how to manipulate Oni blood, master fighting techniques, and get a basic education on the history between Honest and Momotaros. And yes, Nato Mudano is the teacher in charge. Shiki, tired of all this talk, just wants to know if he's going to get strong enough to crush the guy who killed his dad. The teacher says that's the plan if Shiki doesn't get stronger. He's out. Later on, while the boy is changing for his first class, Shiki notices he now has horns growing out of his head. Nato explains it's proof his blood has awakened. But the horns will fade away as he advances in his training. Stepping out in his new outfit, Shiki can't help but laugh at how he should be heading to a normal school right about now. Nato tells him there are other students who passed the test to get in, and that out of all of them, Shiki is probably the weakest. If Nato decides the kid's useless later on, he'll be expelled. Shiki asks about his father, and Nato tells him he was taken to the morgue. Since nobody knows the family's religion, Shiki can hold the funeral however he wants. Since the topic came up, Nato adds that wallowing in regret is just a waste of time, which only annoys his new student. Either way, the teacher says Shiki should get stronger so he never has to regret anything again and not be an irrational fool who wastes his experiences. Shiki is about to compliment his teacher for such spot-on advice, but Nato cuts him off and orders him to get to class in 15 seconds flat. Shiki calls him out for cheating with those scooters, so Nato threatens to expel him. Panting at the classroom door, Shiki considers kicking it open for a dramatic entrance, but Nato beats him to it, booting him through the door in the least cool way possible. The poor guy ends up looking like a total loser in front of his new classmates. Nose bleeding, Shiki asks a classmate, Jin Kugasaki, for a tissue, figuring the guy must have allergies since he's wearing a mask. Jin makes it clear he doesn't want to talk to him, which pushes Shiki's buttons and makes him want to pick a fight. Spotting that Jin doesn't have any horns, Shiki teases him, calling him a baby for not having awakened yet. So Jin reveals his horns and points out that the only ones still walking around with those things on their heads are clueless newbies who barely know what they're doing. Annoyed by his classmate's remark, Ikari Yaeroshi asks if he's being lumped in with the rookies just because he's got his horn showing. When Jin confirms it, Ikari actually seems happy, looks like he's eager to pick a fight. Amused, Kuina Sazanami eggs him on, telling the guy to go for it. While Juji Usurub tries to bring some sense to the group, reminding everyone that breaking the rules isn't the way to go. As usual, Homer Bayabugora shyly apologizes for not having a handkerchief. And meanwhile, the gloomy Rokiro Kiriyama is convinced he's about to die from a stomachache. In an attempt to keep the peace, Juji tears a page from his own book to offer as a makeshift tissue. But Shiki refuses. He claims that paper would just hurt his nose. Ignoring everyone else, Shiki turns his attention back to Jin, the kids still acting cocky, and Shiki can't let it slide. But before things get out of hand, the teacher steps in, laying down the law and putting an end to the chaos. With order restored, he explains that the original plan was to introduce the school and take everyone on a tour. But now he's decided to have a little fun with a demon hunting game. He leads the group to the Shinra forest and lays out the rules. The students have 1 hour to make it back to the school without getting caught by him. If you get caught, you have to stay put. If everyone gets caught, game over, and anyone who doesn't make it back is expelled on the spot. The threat has everyone terrified, and Shiki grumbles about how this guy is always talking about expelling people. Nato wants them to understand. If they think this is a normal school, they're dead wrong. After graduation, they'll be the front line against the Momotaros, so this mission is no walk in the park. Oh, and as today's hunter, Nato says he won't use any blood techniques. But the students are free to do whatever they want, just don't go berserk, or he'll have to step things up. Jin asks what happens if someone manages to kill the teacher. After all, if Nato doesn't use his blood, that could happen. Without missing a beat, Nato tells them if they can actually kill him, they'll leave the forest with a diploma in hand and can pick whichever unit they want. To Shiki, this feels like a rare shot at getting closer to Samadare. Though honestly, taking down the umbrella guy seems impossible. In the end, Nato Mudano reminds everyone they're here for a reason. They all have goals, and the only way to reach them is to overcome countless obstacles along the way. If you can't give it your all, you'll just get left behind. He looks around and sees everyone ready, except Shiki. so he asks if the kid wants to give up before the test even starts. But Shiki shows he's all in. He's been challenged by another man, and there's no way he's backing down now. With everything settled, the demon hunt was about to begin, a wild game of tag where the participants had to avoid being caught for a whole hour while making their way back to school. Before it all kicked off, Nato laid out one more rule: grabbing 2 balls. He announced that the students would need them to win. Then, without warning, he hurled both balls deep into the forest, making it clear that showing up at school without one would be pointless. Juji, confused, asked what kind of setup this was, since there were only 2 balls, while Ikari quickly figured out the goal was to steal from the others. Nato went on to say the students would be split into 3 groups. The first team, Homer Bayabugora, Shiki Ikenos, and Jin Kugasaki. The second, Ikari Yaeroshi and Juji Yusuru. And the third team, Rokuro Kiriyama and Kuina Sazanami. According to the teacher, only the second and third teams would have a ball, which just confirmed for Ikari that the whole point was to steal from their classmates. Hokuro, meanwhile, was practically getting a headache just thinking about the fact that 3 people were about to get expelled right out of the gate. Nato opened the door leading into the forest and announced that he'd join them 15 minutes after the students went in. Shiki, never one to hide his feelings, made it clear he refused to team up with the masked idiot, so the teacher immediately threatened to kick him out if he didn't quit whining. Homer approached Shiki and, bowing slightly, promised she'd do her best not to be a dead weight on the team. Shiki, for his part, was a delinquent with 0 experience talking to girls. In fact, it had been years since a girl had even started a conversation with him, so he ended up putting his social awkwardness on full display by swearing, with all his heart, that he'd protect her. Afraid of being a burden, the girl doubled down, assuring him she'd do whatever it took not to get in the way. Then she went over to Jin to let him know she was counting on him, too, but he just ignored her. The cold shoulder made her burst into tears, apologizing for even talking to him. Shiki scolded his teammate, then tried to comfort Homer, telling her that crying would ruin her cute face. He quickly corrected himself, saying she was still cute even when she cried, just even cuter when she smiled. Homer pleaded with him not to call her cute, which, of course, Shiki found even cuter. Regardless, he told her the 2 of them would win this thing on their own, and made sure to tell Jin as much. Jin, unimpressed, told him to stop acting so needy and dragging him into everything. He added that Shiki was getting expelled no matter what, so he'd better just disappear before embarrassing himself. Shiki shot back that he had a very clear goal and wasn't about to run away. Jin just shrugged, guessing it must be a pretty pathetic goal, which only made Shiki even more furious. Enough talk. The teacher ordered the first group into the forest. After the 2 boys dashed in, Homer stood frozen in fear for a few seconds before finally deciding to enter, bringing all her nerves along for the ride. Inside, Jin remembered Nato telling him to attack with the intention to kill, because if he succeeded, he could graduate right then and there and join whichever unit he wanted. To Jin, this was his shot at getting into the unit of his choice and tracking down a certain someone he hated. Suddenly, Shiki snuck up behind him and tried to whack him with a stick, but Jin dodged. Shiki said he didn't usually pick pointless fights, but he'd go into debt to fight for something that mattered. After all, this idiot had just called his dream ridiculous, and now he'd have to pay for that. Without flinching, Jin ripped off his mask, revealing a mouth full of hideous scars. Then, he tore open most of his own forearm, shaping the gushing blood into spinning blades, unleashing the blood eclipse. Shiki, honestly impressed, asked how the hell Jin could do that. Jin taunted him, saying he should just run away if he was scared. But Shiki shot back that if he chickened out now, his father's death really would become meaningless. Seeing his teammate out for revenge, Jin said that's exactly why the 2 of them would never see eye to eye. Tired of the back and forth, Shiki bit his own finger to try using his blood, but nothing happened, no matter how hard he focused. That's when he realized it wasn't as easy as just wanting it to work. Jin, on the other hand, seemed to have no trouble at all. And if there's one thing that pissed Shiki off, it was watching Jin pull off something he couldn't. Jin declared that Shiki would be a warm-up before he killed the teacher, and Shiki was left with no choice but to fight back with his stick. Even in this situation, he showed some guts, charging in for a head-on fight, a move Jin matched. As the 2 crossed paths, not only was Shiki's stick split in half, but so were countless trees all around them. Meanwhile, lost in the woods, the 3rd member of the group was wandering around, yelling for her teammates. She heard the chaos from the fight between her so-called allies, and, scared, got distracted and tripped over a tree root. That was when she became certain she never should have come to this damn school. She perked up for a moment, remembering Ikenos had promised to help, but quickly slipped back into self-doubt, convinced she was just useless and always relying on others. Nearby, someone with an umbrella had already started to control one of the balls in the game. Outside the forest, the other groups were left wondering what the hell that crash had been inside. Unsurprisingly, this only made Hokuro more anxious, while Akari got even more hyped to get into the woods. Back at the duel, Shiki did whatever he could to fight back with his bare hands, but every punch missed its mark. Jin, on the other hand, landed a punch square on Shiki's nose, making him feel the pain right away. Frustrated by his own failures, Shiki muttered to himself about how Jin could use his blood so easily and how Jin's blood had a totally different shape from his, just like the teachers did. Shiki couldn't make sense of any of it. In fact, it dawned on him that he didn't really understand anything about this world, and that confusion left him wide open. Distracted, the Oni takes a hard hit to the face and boils with anger. It's the first time he's ever been this frustrated by not understanding something. With the fight under control, Jin mocks his rival for not even managing to use blood, then turns to leave. But Shiki, refusing to stay down, manages to get back on his feet and calls out, telling his opponent to wait up. Jin, already out of patience, hurls a massive spinning blade straight at Shiki. At that exact moment, Homer appears out of nowhere after searching for her friends for so long. Unfortunately, she pops up right as the blade is flying by a split second later, and she could have been killed on the spot. Honestly, that's exactly what would have happened if Shiki hadn't yanked her out of harm's way at the very last second, though he ends up taking a nasty cut to his own arm. Furious, he demands that Jin apologize. Jin just shrugs and says something like, "If you go out in the rain, you're bound to get wet." In other words, if Shiki freaked out over a simple attack like that, maybe he should just go home, because things are only going to get worse from here. This insolence makes Shiki even angrier until he notices Homer, head bowed, apologizing over and over, practically 3 times a second, because Shiki got hurt protecting her. Shiki insists the masked guy is the one to blame, but guilt washes over Homer so intensely that she starts to bleed from her nose. And it's not just a trickle, it's almost scary. In her own words, she says she'll pay for this with her own life. Before anyone can react, the insane amount of blood pours out and transforms into a huge, terrifying creature. Even Jin's eyes go wide at the sight of it. He knows Honest have way more blood than humans, but this is just insane. Homer shouts at her teammates to run while they still can, or the thing will kill them. As she speaks, the monster rears up, ready to unleash a devastating attack. Meanwhile, just 2 minutes earlier, Nato Mudano was waiting bored out of his mind in another part of the forest, hoping something would happen. The school principal appeared out of nowhere, asking if the teacher was really just planning to explain the basics of the school today. But honestly, giving out tough assignments on day 1 is exactly his style. Nato argues that hands-on training is way more effective than wasting a whole day just lecturing. The principal nods, admitting that Nato really does care about his students. He mentions that many Honest die every year, most of them just kids, targeted because they have a demon ancestor. Some are taken alive, to be used as test subjects. The principal wonders what must go through those kids' minds as they're killed, without ever understanding why. In the end, he wishes there was a true, equal paradise for everyone. Nato replies that they don't need paradise. If the kids get strong enough, they won't die. Simple as that. In that case, the principal tells him to make sure those kids get powerful enough to survive. And with that, he vanishes. Right then, Nato hears another explosion in the distance, the aftermath of Group 1's battle. Back at the epicenter, Shiki barely dodges death after the giant demoness's devastating attack. Jin desperately tries to hurt the monster, but nothing works. Shiki shouts for their teammate to stop the creature, just so they can check something. But Homer is gushing blood from every pore like a leaking bag. She's in no shape to help anyone. Having used up too much blood, Homer faints. Shiki sprints over to drag her out from under the monster before things get even worse. But as he gets closer, he realizes the thing is actually shielding her, which makes Jin wonder if blood itself can have a will of its own. Suddenly, the giant spews a torrent of blood right at them. Jin manages to duck behind a rock for cover, but Shiki gets swept away by the flood. Homer wakes up and begs her big sis to stop. Shiki, hearing her call the monster's sister, is completely thrown off. Homer insists they run, but Shiki refuses to let his friend bleed out and die in front of him. It's just too much. Besides, it's painfully clear how much Homer is suffering. Then, Homer loses consciousness again, and the giant lets out a roar so loud it rattles everyone outside the forest, like a hurricane passing through. From high in a tree, Nato witnesses the scene and immediately recognizes Homer by Abugora's blood eclipse released. The teacher can't help but wonder how the others are going to handle this mess. As for Shiki, he tries to gather some of the blood from the ground to use in the fight, but he fails again. Nato notes that it's useless what the boy pulled off that one time was an extreme technique, a 1 in 100 shot. Struggling in the fight, Shiki starts feeling like a complete failure. He's never lost a fight before. After all, they killed his father, and now he can't do a thing. The feeling of being helpless and on the verge of dying such a pathetic death only makes his rage and frustration grow. Jin tells him to at least send a voice message if he's going to cry, then steps up, ripping open both his arms to shape them into different saw blades for the fight. Even though he knows he hasn't recovered from his injuries, he's also aware that running now would be the end of him. Nato, watching, observes that creating different forms simultaneously is a pretty advanced skill, proving Jin Kugasaki is a talented and experienced student. In the end, Oni blood can freely change its shape and intensity. Whatever a person imagines gets transmitted from the brain, through the nerves and blood vessels, until it takes form. Since the process is controlled by the mind, it can cause trauma in some people, or it might reflect tastes, preferences, or life experiences, almost as if the shape of the blood gives you a quick glimpse into the creator's soul. At some point, this entire technique came to be known as the blood eclipse release. Using this tactic, Jin charges at the giant, dodges her first swipe, and slashes through that blood-red skin with his spinning blade. Riding the momentum from his leap, he aims straight for her neck, but the giant, acting on pure reflex, shields herself with her arm, blocking the blow before it hits anything vital. Meanwhile, Shiki is doing everything he can to summon his blood, but he's still completely out of commission. Thinking about it, he realizes that Jin has only been creating these razor-sharp blood blades, and that the giant is actually Homer's sister. Given that Jin's room was filled with weapons, Shiki suddenly understands what Jin did back when he managed to use his blood successfully. Then, out of nowhere, the giant lets out another scream that makes Jin's ears ring. That's when Nato decides his students have reached their limit and steps in to interfere. But before he can, Shiki Ikanos appears, wielding an automatic rifle after unleashing the blood eclipse. So, the teacher holds back, curious to see how this will play out. The giant swings at Shiki, trying to flatten him with a slap. But he dodges and fires right into her chest, blasting her body apart in a way that's almost unreal, leaving both Jin and Nato completely stunned by what they're seeing. Homer faints after her Oni is destroyed, just as a rain of blood falls from the sky, mixing with the real rain pouring down at the same time. Shiki asks how Homer is doing and stumbles over to her, but ends up collapsing to the ground himself, totally spent. The teacher explains that the student fired with an insanely high concentration of blood, so he really needs to learn to take it easier next time. Stubborn as ever, the boy pretends it's nothing and gets up with a wild look in his eyes, but his body gives out, and he crashes down again. Nato warns that using too much blood could actually kill the kid, so it'd be wise to start pacing himself. Still, watching from the side, Mudano can't help but think this guy's got way too much power. Speaking of overdoing it, Shiki admits that Baibugora is suffering from blood loss too and points out that she needs help immediately. Mudano finds it odd how this Oni worries more about others even when she's on the verge of death herself. Suddenly, he has to react fast to block an attack from behind Jin Kugasaki strikes, aiming to catch him off guard. After his ambush fails, Jin's selfish nature comes out as he declares nobody should waste time worrying about injured classmates. The teacher asks what would happen if they were in danger without first aid, but the student shrugs it off, saying that's none of his business. Faced with this attitude, Mudano makes it clear that he doesn't like to discriminate against students. But honestly, he can't stand types like Jin. Jin himself never cared about being the class favorite, but warns the teacher not to be lying because he's not holding back. Not when killing Mudano could get him into any unit he wants. Since Jin brought it up, the teacher reassures him that he won't be using any blood in this fight, so Jin can relax. Feeling insulted, Jin Kugasaki charges in with his blade at blinding speed, but once again, his attack is stopped by his opponent's umbrella. He refuses to quit, launching the same strike over and over from different angles, trying to break through by force, but nothing works. Mudano calmly points out that a regular blade isn't cutting through this umbrella, it's far from ordinary. With that, the Oni triggers a mechanism in his weapon that releases a thick cloud of smoke from the tip. Before anything else, to put the student at ease, Mudano explains that it's not poison. Now trapped in the smoke and unable to see a thing, Jin still thinks he can kill his teacher as soon as he gets close. But then, bullets hit his arm, forcing him to dash out of the smoke and duck behind a tree for cover. Meanwhile, Mudano is using his umbrella as a firearm from a distance. He explains that, since his opponent prefers close combat, it made sense to put some distance between them. In any case, the bullets are rubber, they won't kill Jin, but they should mess with the arm he injured fighting the Titan. Basically, it's all about exploiting the enemy's weak points, as the instructor puts it. For his part, Jin figures he still has a card up his sleeve and waits for a chance to surprise Mudano. When he finally gets a break from the barrage, he pokes his head out from cover and unleashes the bloody incision dance, a rapid-fire volley of blades aimed at the teacher. Nato Mudano hadn't realized his opponent had a strategy for ranged attacks. But that doesn't mean he's losing his cool. On the contrary, he keeps calm while Jin hurls more blades and steadily gets closer. Once the student is within range, the teacher whips out a smoke bomb from his umbrella and lobs it at his adversary. It's another smoke bomb, so once again, Jin finds himself lost in a haze, thinking Nato's going to stick to the same long-distance tactics. But before he knows what hit him, he takes a punch in the back so hard it sends him flying like a ragdoll. Mudano explains that it was a mistake to assume he'd keep his distance. Plus, Jin spent too much effort protecting his arm and neglected everything else. As Jin struggles to get up, he snaps at the teacher to shut up. But his strength fails him, and he falls again. Nato advises him to assess his opponent's strength before jumping into a fight with an injured arm. Then pins Jin with his umbrella and tells him he'd be dead in a real especially after using so much of his own blood. Even though he's completely pinned, Jin still fights back, insisting it isn't over. Mudano finally loses his patience with the kid's stubbornness and asks if this is all about wanting to find his father. At that, Jin's eyes flare with rage, and Shiki looks on, shocked by what he just heard. Jin has no clue how this guy figured out his secret, but Mudano reveals that he did a little digging and knows a few things. For example, Jin Kugasaki's father is a Momotaro. The boy doesn't bother denying it, he admits it outright and adds that his father is a piece of trash who stole everything from him. His family, his dreams, everything. Because of the scars his father left on him, Jin's hatred has never faded for even a second. Since he was a kid, Jin had to eat garbage to survive. And he's grown up waiting for nothing but a chance to kill the man who did this to him. As he tears the umbrella off, Kugasaki declares that not even death scares him. Faced with this, Nato Mudano asks what a brat like him could possibly know about life. Without a second thought, he grabs the student's head and slams it into the ground. Then he tells the boy not to die for that goal, live for it. If Jin Kugasaki can't understand the difference, he's got no future. A little later, while the other groups are still waiting for their plants outside the forest, Professor Mudano calls the infirmary, asking them to send someone to his location. Homer Bayabugora needs to be taken out of the exam. Oh, and he's also tied up Jin Kugasaki. After the teacher hung up the phone, Shiki finally managed to get up after lying motionless for a while. Mudano announced there were 5 minutes and 42 seconds left, showing off that he'd snagged one of the balls from the contest. The student complained it wasn't fair, but Mudano couldn't care less. He explained that Shiki could either try to find the other ball in the time left, or just steal it from the teacher. The choice was his. After witnessing what happened to his classmate, Shiki quickly retreated, throwing off his possible opponent. Left behind, Jin grumbled about being tied up, until Shiki popped out from a bush nearby and asked him for a little help taking down Mudano, promising he'd help Jin in return. Even so, Jin turned him down, insisting it would be humiliating to be rescued by this guy. Annoyed, Shiki questioned whether Jin's pride was really more important than his own goal, clarifying that he didn't mind teaming up with someone he hated if it meant getting what he wanted. Jin insisted this had nothing to do with Shiki, but Shiki revealed the opposite. His own father was a Momotaro too, so at least they had that in common. With that, he asked for help once again, but Jin refused, still surprised by what he'd just learned. Meanwhile, Nato was leaping through the trees for a better view of where Shiki had run off to. Eventually, he spotted Shiki sprinting down a forest trail and jumped down to block his path. As Shiki screeched to a halt, the teacher reminded him he'd fail the test if he didn't bring home at least one ball. That just made Shiki even angrier at Kugasaki, since he'd saved the guy and was still stuck playing bait. Just then, Jin pounced from a tree, aiming to catch Nato off guard. A while earlier, when Jin had said no for the second time, what he actually meant was that he wasn't going to help Shiki, rather, Shiki was going to help him. Now, at crunch time, Shiki figured that if this kid had the nerve to act so cocky, the least he could do was not screw things up. Either way, Mudano dodged Jin's attack and immediately caught on that the two of them were working together. But neither of them could properly use their blood abilities anymore, they were both too exhausted. Amid all that, Jin revealed another trick up his sleeve. He'd tied the rope the teacher had used on him around his own hand, counting on Mudano to dodge his strike and leave himself wide open for a throw. Sure enough, the tactic worked, and they managed to wrap up the teacher. With Mudano tied up, the two boys pulled with all their strength. But it was obvious they just didn't have enough power to drag Nato Mudano anywhere. According to Mudano himself, if the kids had been at full strength, maybe they could have pulled it off. Just then, a blade of blood came slashing through the air, forcing the teacher to jerk his neck away at the last second to avoid getting his head sliced clean off. That was Jin going all out, using the last of his strength, and now the fight had taken a dangerous turn for him. Shiki took advantage of the wild move Mudano had to make, lunging for his own ball and managing to knock it loose from the teacher's grip, so it rolled over near Kugasaki. Given the circumstances, Mudano figured there were less than 3 minutes left, and if Jin sprinted with everything he had, he might just make it back to the school in time. but it was also likely Shiki would chase him down to steal the ball. So Mudano thought maybe he could just let them fight and snatch the ball for himself. But then, Shiki surprised everyone. He was genuinely happy that Jin ended up with the ball, telling him to run for the finish line. Jin and Mudano were both caught off guard. Jin took the ball and dashed off, while Shiki cheered him on and kept taunting the teacher. Realizing the kid didn't get it, Nato explained, if Jin crossed the finish line, only he would win, and whoever lost would be expelled. Hearing this, Shiki just sat down and started to cry, while Mudano admitted this kid's stupidity was beyond anything he'd accounted for. Meanwhile, Jin made it to the end just in time to save himself, but started thinking about when Shiki had shown up to help him out and how he'd pushed Jin to make a run for it. Even though he tried to act like he didn't care, Jin stopped, turned around, and headed back. Shiki asked if he'd lost his sense of direction, but Jin explained he just didn't want to owe this guy another favor. Besides, even if he got expelled, Jin swore he'd reach his goal on his own, which is why he got close to hand Shiki the ball. That's when a weird creature barged in, messing up the Oni's dash. V asked what that chubby beast was, and the teacher explained it was an instant transmission tapir named Muku, though they just called it Mukun. Mukun could run up to 300 miles per hour and deliver messages without leaving any trace, which meant there had to be an emergency. So, Mudano played the message. Someone from the Oni organization in Kyoto was asking for reinforcements due to an attack by the Momotaro. Outside the Shinra forest, the sky finally cleared and the other students started complaining about how long things were taking. Since an hour had already passed, Juji Yuzurube started to suspect all three had failed the test. Ikari was still hyped to get into the forest, while Hokuro figured it was more likely he'd catch a fever in this rain than actually find the test ball. Soon after, Mudano showed up with the two students and explained that Baibugora had been taken to the infirmary for overusing her blood powers, and she'd need a few days to recover. As for today's training, it was cancelled. Kyoto's Oni had called for help, and they had to leave immediately. In the next scene, already gathered on a boat with his students, Mudano was cranking out over 401 finger push-ups, while poor Shiki Ikenos was sick of the horns on his head. After pushing himself to the limit, Shiki finally managed to hide his funart and ran over, excited, to tell Ikari, who just told him to keep quiet, since he was the last one to pull it off. Shiki doesn't let it slide. He challenges the guy to a one-on-one right there. Meanwhile, Juji asks the teacher if there's any problem with them heading into the thick of things with the Momotaro organization. Nato explains they really don't have a choice. All the other students and teachers are away, training. Even so, he makes it clear the students will only help out with minor tasks, nothing that'll put them on the battlefield. That frustrates Shiki, and Ikari complains that he doesn't want to play messenger boy, especially after their game of tag was called off earlier. Shiki needles him, saying at least he wasn't expelled, while Juji argues that even small tasks are still honest work. Ikari fires back. He wants to rack up some real battle experience, so he tells Four Eyes to shut up. Juji just takes off his glasses and announces he's not Four Eyes anymore. While the two bicker, Shiki turns to the teacher and asks if they're really just going to do minor errands. Mudano confirms it. He's not interested in upping the body count. Kuina Sazanami wants to know why they have to wear school uniforms to a war, and the teacher explains that the whole point is not to draw attention. On that note, he orders everyone to act like regular students and tells Kuina not to do anything that'll get her arrested. Instantly, she snaps at him to shut up. But then, out of nowhere, she starts thinking maybe the teacher's actually worried about her and suddenly turns into this sweet, innocent girl pretending not to care about his concern. Hokuro chimes in, asking what sort of tasks they'll actually be doing in Kyoto. Just thinking about being surrounded by so many people gets his heart racing. In fact, he's feeling so anxious it's like he's about to die. Mudano breaks it down. The Oni organization has several branches spread across every village, district, and city in the country, and each branch is split mainly into two divisions of fighters. There's the battle unit, which takes the front lines when the Momotaros attack. And there's the support unit, which helps the honest living among humans, taking in honest who have no family and helping them with everyday life. Since honest can't go to regular doctors, members of this unit have to know how to do both physical and psychological checkups. And they also act as medics during fights with the Momotaros. In this case, Mudano and his students are going as the support unit. Shiki's frustrated he won't get to fight on the front lines, and gets stronger, especially since the guy who killed his father is probably mixed up in all this. And this could have been his chance for revenge, even though Shiki doesn't say any of that out loud. Mudano makes it clear the Momotaro he's after isn't in Kyoto. According to the teacher, both the Honest and the Momotaros have their own territories. Juji asks what kind of Momotaro they'll be dealing with in Kyoto. All Nato Mudano will say is they're the tough kind. The next day, the students are taken to the capital, and they're amazed to find out there's actually an Oni base in this seemingly peaceful region. According to their teacher, the base is located beneath the Uryuta temple. But to everyone's confusion, they're led to a restaurant called Mizumoto. Inside, an elderly woman appears and says she's been expecting them. As the group steps inside, their looks of confusion only deepen, until the woman leads them into a private room, one that has a hidden entrance in the floor, complete with a staircase leading down into the underground, just as the teacher had described. Now, about those tough guys Nato mentioned, one Oni tries to call for backup on his radio, but the person on the other end can't answer, seeing as he's missing his head. For Tsubakiri Mamamiya, the culprit, Honest are nothing more than worms lined up pretending to be humans with their little armies. As for the vice captain, Yomogi Mamakusa, she thinks her superior worries way too much about these things, and he always leaves a mess that's a pain to clean up after a mission. The thing is, what really gets on Tsubakiri's nerves is when a worm struts up to him all full of itself, but at least if they were female Honest, he could put up with it. After all, the females are more resistant to pain, which makes them better subjects for his experiments. Too bad the last one didn't survive. Since the topics come up, Yomogi is quick to point out how much she hates his disgusting research, which actually offends Tsubakiri. His beloved mix of dog, monkey, and pheasant has feelings too, or at least, it should. Another thing his experiment is missing is any sense of beauty. And that's exactly why Momotaro calls the creature ugly. It's just a fancy way to call it hideous. Still, ugly or not, the critter is a real anti-Oni machine. And that's exactly what it's for. Yomogi gets it. She knows the guy is addicted to his weird experiments, but she thinks he should focus more on what he's actually paid to do: find and eliminate Honest, and protect civilians in secret. Tsubakiri's not arguing with her. He just thinks it's boring to deal with weak enemies instead of the new recruits. With all his complaining, Yomogi finally asks why he even joined the Momotaro organization in the first place. He admits he simply can't contain his scientific curiosity. Oni blood fascinates him, and being in the organization lets him stay close to these intriguing beings, with their regenerative abilities and weapons forged from their own blood. Yomogi, on the other hand, is all about protocol. She only kills these demons because they're dangerous, and if left unchecked, they could go on a rampage and kill civilians. She reminds him that he only gets to do his research because he's part of the organization, so maybe he should be a little more grateful. Tsubakiri figures he is pulling his weight. If his research into manipulating Oni blood goes well, it could seriously boost the Momotaro's firepower. Plus, developing medicine based on the Honest regenerative blood wouldn't be a bad thing either, and let's be real, those discoveries could be pretty profitable. Not that he cares about the money, of course. It's all for the good of the organization. For what it's worth, Yomogi always thought the Momotaro's blood was similar to the Honest, and Tsubakiri doesn't disagree. Still, he'd much rather experiment on the enemy than on his own kind, obviously. If he sees demons as nothing but worms, they're nothing more than test subjects for his experiments. Speaking of which, a young Oni had managed to survive the massacre in that area, thinking he was safe as long as he stayed quiet. But all along, Tsubakiri was just pretending not to know where the boy was hiding. At some point, he decides to shatter the poor kid's hopes by suddenly appearing in front of him. With no other children left for his experiments, this is Tsubakiri's chance to fill that vacancy. If Yomogi is going to take the boy away, she volunteers to knock him out, but when she smacks him, the Oni's blood splatters all over Momotaro's clothes. Yomogi knows that means trouble, and sure enough, Tsubakiri is furious. He always wears a disposable lab coat during his research. But now that his clothes are stained, he takes it out on the boy with a string of passive-aggressive pecks. But that isn't enough for him. He wants to drag the boy's parents over and show him that they're dead. Obviously, the kid is terrified and would never say who his parents are, not that Momotaro could find out anyway, given the mountain of corpses. But Tsubakiri isn't just known for his scientific skill, he's also creative. Like an artist, he levitates the severed limbs of the dead Honest and presses them against the boy's body. Watching this brutal scene, Yomogi reflects that Momotaros fight by releasing black bacteria from their bodies. They can use these bacteria to forge weapons or even launch them as attacks. There are plenty of ways to fight, but Tsubakiri always seems to find the most twisted one of all, like stuffing the bacteria into corpses so he can control them. In the end, Tsubakiri laments the loss of his test subject. But it's fine, he can always find another. With that, he tells Ugly to eat the pile of bodies and put an end to the charade, then calls his partner to get back to work. Meanwhile, in the same city where this hidden tragedy has just played out, the rookie Honest are being taken to the base. Shiki, amazed, asks if this is really the underground of Kyoto, and Nato explains that some of the shops in the area have secret passages that lead down to the Uryuta temple's underground chambers. After a long walk, the group finally arrives at the Oni organization's Kyoto branch. In one of the mansion-like building's rooms, two women call for the attention of a doctor who's working nearby. but he's out of patience and just wants to step out for some fresh air. That's when he spots Nato and greets his supposed friend with Danito, asking why he didn't send a message to let them know he was coming. Then, noticing a cute girl by his side, he quickly fixes his hair so he doesn't look bad in front of her. According to the teacher, this guy's name is Kyoka Waranzaka, and he's the chief commander of the Kyoto support unit. Kyoka hugs Danito and mentions that the two of them studied together at Rosetsu Academy, while the teacher makes it very clear he couldn't care less about the conversation. Speaking of which, he announces he's heading to the front lines now. Shiki asks if he can go along, and Akari isn't thrilled about staying with this weird pink-haired guy either. Kyoka comments that Danito's students are a handful, and speaking of them, Mudano just lets the guy do whatever he wants with the troublemakers and leaves to carry out his own orders. A nurse opens a door and calls for the doctor again. As soon as she sees the Rosetsu students, she tells everyone to get changed right away, they're going to help out. After changing, the students are led down a hallway filled with honest wounded in the battle that's raging at that very moment. Shiki spots a man who's just been brought in, and since he's lost both his arms and legs, the rookie is horrified. On top of that, the patient's lungs are badly damaged, and he's only expected to survive another 3 minutes. Even so, Kyoka displays an almost infuriating confidence despite how dire things look, and he insists he's not about to let this guy die. Shiki, shaken, says that's impossible, so Kyoka explains that even if it doesn't look like it, he's a pretty big deal in the organization, and there's a good reason for that. To prove he's not just talking, Kyoka gathers several bags of blood and invites the rookies to gain some hands-on experience in the field. Meanwhile, in another corner of massive Kyoto, Tsubakiri and Yamogi are taking down one Oni after another, but there are still more to go. The problem for the Honest is that they just watched their captain and vice-captain get absolutely demolished right before their eyes. Not exactly a morale booster. So yeah, the demons are scared out of their minds and pretty sure they're not making it out of this fight. On the other hand, confidence is one thing the enemy scientist has in spades. And it's not just the Momoteros who think they'll survive this. Just as powerful, Nato Mudano appears, wielding an umbrella made of blood, and with his torrential reincarnation, he summons his archers to rain down devastating arrows on the enemy. With Mudano's arrival, the Honest suddenly get their spirits back. But even though his power is on full display, Tsubakiri is clever enough to use the corpses of fallen Honest as shields to absorb the arrows. Not only that, but the Momotaro recognizes Nato and mentions there's a place in Kyoto where the Honest have been gathering in secret. If he destroys it, their numbers will drop dramatically. Naturally, Nato claims he doesn't know anything about that, so Tsubakiri sarcastically asks for a tourist spot recommendation. Since the temple that serves as the Kyoto base is also a tourist attraction, Mudano realizes this guy's intuition isn't something to take lightly. He needs to be careful with what he says. So, he tells his opponent he has the perfect sightseeing spot for him. Hell. Back with the wounded, Kyoka connects the blood bags to the patient's veins, then asks if he wants his arms or legs back. The man, who just became a father, says all he wants is the chance to hold his child. The doctor is genuinely happy to help, but gives a heads up the procedure is going to hurt like hell, and the guy better be ready for it. Kyoka clarifies that his blood isn't made for fighting, but it has other uses, like supercharging the Honest healing abilities several times over. So when the doctor gives his blood for the wounded man to drink, the patient's body goes into an intense reaction. The nurse tells the rookies to hold him down, and though they're scared, they do as told. There's so much blood pouring out that, even with all those bags, it's almost gone in no time. The nurse orders more rookies to fetch additional supplies. While some are holding the injured man, others are sprinting for the regenerative blood. Once the procedure starts to work and the patient's arms begin to grow back, Shiki is so shocked he lets go instantly. All the rookies are visibly shaken by the surreal miracle unfolding in front of them, while the man responsible for it all can't help but smile in satisfaction. Not only the arms, but the Oni's chest is fully healed as well. Still at a loss for words, Shiki wonders if it's possible to get the man's legs back too. The doctor explains that, in small doses, he can regrow lost limbs multiple times. But if too much is taken at once, the body builds up antibodies, making regeneration impossible. In other words, the legs can't be restored now, especially since the injured Oni can't handle any more blood at the moment. Speaking of him, Kyoka informs the fighter that he'll have to be removed from the battle unit. But now the two of them will be fighting together in the support unit. The commander promises to make him a top-notch prosthetic leg so he can run around with his child. Hearing this, the new dad bursts into tears, thanking everyone in whatever way he can for the miracle he's received. With that, Kyoka declares that this is a war between Honest and Momoteros, and that this gravely injured fighter could be any one of the rookies standing there. The doctor knows each person has their own reasons for being on the front lines, but he wants them to understand the battle isn't only fought there. You can only fight with confidence at the front when you have solid support behind you. Saving those who get hurt on the front lines is the job of someone in the support unit, like Kyoka Waranzaka. In other words, this is his battlefield. After this inspiring speech, Ikari can't help but admit that, at first, he thought the guy was annoying and arrogant, but honestly, he's actually pretty awesome. Finally, Kyoka takes advantage of his newfound popularity with the kids and asks Shiki to take on a different task for him. He leads the rookie over to a little girl named Mei and asks him to keep an eye on her. Mei was brought to the base yesterday after being attacked by Momotaros, and with her parents missing. The doctor, who seems to think the boy is a real sweetheart, is convinced he'll handle this just fine. After leaving the two alone, Shiki goes over to Mei and tries to cheer her up by talking about how beautiful the garden is, but the poor girl can't even bring herself to look at him. Still, he doesn't give up. He keeps trying to make conversation until, finally, he gets her attention by inviting her to the Uryuda Dera temple. She's immediately curious about it, so he asks if she's never heard of the temple at school. With sadness in her eyes, Mei quietly says she doesn't go to school, leaving Shiki at a total loss for words. Meanwhile, more and more wounded fighters keep arriving at the base, and soon Mei is faced with the worst news imaginable. Her parents are among the bodies brought in by the support unit. The moment she realizes, she rushes over, clinging to her parents and breaking down in tears, completely inconsolable. No matter how much experience Kyoko has, he knows he'll never get used to pain like this. Back at Tsubakiri's place, he laughs at Mudano's joke, but quickly changes the subject and asks if he received his little gift. By that, he means a bunch of Honus infected with Momotaro's bacteria, scattered around in places where they'll be easy to find. Since it's terrible for the Honus to have their own kind wandering around as corpses, it's best to gather them up as soon as possible. By the way, Tsubakiri can control any of those bodies that have been taken to the Oni base in Kyoto whenever he wants. With that, he brings Mei's father back to life. At first, the man seems happy, but almost immediately, he's got his hands around the child's neck, and Kyoko is forced to step in, driving two scalpels into the revived Oni's head while Shiki covers the little girl's eyes. According to the doctor, the only way to stop him was to destroy his brain, since Mei's father had fallen victim to a power belonging to a Momotaro named Tsubakiri. Watching this unfold, Mei breaks down and cries even harder, while Shiki Ikanos is consumed with rage for the piece of trash that is Tsubakiri. Either way, Mei's father wasn't the only one infected. Before long, other corpses began to move as well. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.